Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Miranda Ayim Podcast. My name is Miranda Ayim, and I'm a two-time Olympian with Team Canada. Now, the conversation you're about to hear today was actually not originally supposed to be a podcast. It's from an Instagram live session that we did, but the content was so rich, it was so good, I had to share it with you guys on this platform. Now, the audio and visual quality is not top tier, but I don't think it will bother you much once we get into it. So my guest today is Sefu Bernard, a coach by training and a teacher by calling. He's worked the last 20 years all over the world, internationally and domestically, with the NBA, the WNBA, Canada Basketball, NHL. Most recently and currently, he is the Director of Player Development with the Washington Mystics, as well as the founder of a youth sport initiative called Athlete Centered Experience, or ACX. In this interview, Sefu and I discuss the ideal characteristics of a high-performance athlete, the grit necessary to succeed at a high level, and the difference in perspectives between coaches and players. We also get into how to build a commitment-based culture, as well as a culture of error. If you want to become a better coach or leader, this conversation is for you. How are you doing?
I'm doing real well. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I know we have a bit of a time difference here. It's the morning there, it's the afternoon here. Are you a morning person? Have you already been up doing things, or are you
I
kind of?
have. I am not a morning person, but these children, they have a way of doing it to you. Force me to get up in the morning. I'm a nighttime guy. I'm 2, 3, 4 in the morning is my ideal time frame to get it in. But I was up, said goodbye to my little guys who went to school, and took a half hour, jumped in the garden, did some tinkering in the garden, and now I'm with you.
Oh, that's nice. Well, I'm so happy that you were able to join me. I'm like super hyped. When I put up that we were going to be chatting today, I had so many responses of people like, yes, he's such a great guy. So happy that you have him on. And
Oh, I appreciate it.
yeah,
I
yeah.
appreciate it.
Me too. I was like, great. That completely validates my choice of guest. For people on either side, I guess, that are following us, who are just joining us and don't know who we are, my name is Miranda Ayim. I'm a two-time Olympian with Team Canada, and I'm joined by Sefu Bernard, who is the Director of Player Development with the Washington Mystics. He is a teacher coach, a coach and business exec by calling, and a coach and a business exec by training, a coach by calling. I love it. I love it. You have like the profession, and then you have like the passion behind it as well. I really like that.
Two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, exactly. So for people who don't know a lot about you, who don't have the pleasure of knowing you personally, could you maybe start off by telling us who you are, where you're from, how you kind of got to where you are today?
I'll start at the end. I got here just largely. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, to borrow the phrase. Everything that I've been able to be a part of, every experience I've been exposed to is the result of somebody believing in me and maybe pushing me and giving me that nudge to give more, do more, stretch more. And so that's how I've gotten to where I am right now. I have just got an insatiable appetite to learn and grow and contribute. I am originally from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. That's home. So wherever I am in the world, Canada will always be home for me. And from there, after done playing, I was able to transition into the professional side of sport and started in the WNBA. I got my roots there late 90s and went on and was part of a great organization at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, where I worked for the Toronto Raptors, the Toronto Maple Leafs, back to the Raptors. And along the way had spent numerous years with Canada Basketball and the great coaches throughout the country. And that's where our paths crossed many moons ago. Um, and so, yeah, I've had a number of experiences all through the game, and I'm grateful for it. The game has taken me um, to many corners throughout the world where I've been able to sit in rooms with people who are like or greater minded, and I'm grateful for it. Had a couple years in Asia working for the NBA out there, and then, like you touched on, I'm now back in the WNBA working for the Washington Mystics these last 5, 6 years.
Okay. Man, time flies. I
It
love how you
does.
started. I love how you started that because that's exactly actually one of the first questions I had for you, or areas of discussion that I wanted to touch on. And it also shows like your character as a person, because the first thing you did was acknowledge everybody who came in front of you. And one thing that stood out to me when you're on Twitter and on your blog is you have this thank the passer hashtag that has kind of created a movement. I think it's been around for a little while now, but all about, giving credit where credit is due. Um, if that even goes down to like attribution on the internet, these days people just be posting stuff willy-nilly. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you had one quote there that you said it says, talking specifically about sport, but it goes in all areas of life. Special players and special people understand the value of putting others in the spotlight. They go out of their way to thank the passer. That's the hashtag. Not doing so rubs them the wrong way. It offends their internal compass that points them towards the right thing to do, feels selfish and deceitful. And for those, I should say, people who aren't sport people, usually thanking the passer is when, like, for example, if I scored a layup and I got the pass from Sefu here, while running back down the court on defense, I will point to him. It takes like a half a second to do, but
Yeah.
just an automatic gesture that you do in sport. Definitely basketball, I'm sure other sports as well. And it's kind of something that has just become part of the game. Was it Coach Wooden who started that?
As far as I know, it's Dean Smith at North Carolina who
Mm.
had started it. That's as far back as I've been able to dig. I'm not sure who he had gotten it from or if it originated with him, but that became a Carolina thing. And they started, I believe, dating back into the 70s. And I just think it's a little thing that makes a big difference. And it's exciting to see the people who do it intuitively, and yet
Mhm.
I think at the same time it's something that we could and should be making um, explicit and overt. This youth program that I've launched here in Cayman, it's explicit and overt because it doesn't come naturally to the kids.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to bemoan, maybe the effects of social media, the ease of sharing something that's not your own, or, maybe this orientation towards have. It's just something you can do. And um, even if you're teaching it explicitly like we do,
Mhm.
um, it then takes a life of its own. It feels good to share the spotlight. And it's a little thing, as I said, that makes a huge difference. And so, I don't know. I've got like my own little quirks and idiosyncrasies, but this one is just one of those intolerables for me. Um, so yeah, you read that. I don't know. You've done your work. I don't even know what year that was. It would have been posted, but I was sitting there like, yeah, that sounds right. I like that. Who wrote that? But I
Who
do.
wrote
I do believe it.
those words of wisdom?
I believe it to my fiber, to my core, and I'm okay being called out on it. I have very few original ideas. I'm more of a cut, paste, tweak kind of guy, and so that's just one of the things I'm all about.
Got to thank the passer. I love it, and it's so great. You talked about sharing in that moment, in the success or whatever. Um, and just the simple action of thanking the pastor, it's like an instant reward, like reward of good behavior, if you want to put it like that. You're just like adding to and feeding into a culture of selflessness, which I think is integral in the sporting world when you're you're operating within a team and a group where there's so many competing interests and goals and all of that. And at the end of the day, the only way it's all going to work together is if you are sacrificing, giving, and putting the needs of the team above your own. And that's what I like about you as a person. That's what I like about you when you're how you display yourself online and what you write about, because you kind of dig into those little things that a lot of people miss, I think, or they kind of gloss over, or we don't really talk about in sports, like those things that kind of get into the heart of character almost, which is kind of like a heavy word sometimes. Well, I love it, but sometimes it can be a heavy word. Bryce Tully and I were just talking about this the other day, and we started to get into, that triad of like it's values, skills, and traits, and that
Okay.
kind of like encapsulates who you are as a person, and like different things of those can be added to and built and all that. And then we were discussing how does character fit in there? Is it the thing that's overarching all of those? Without getting into like a whole philosophical
Yeah,
discussion.
you guys got deep.
We got deep. We always do. We always do. But I'm wondering, do you feel like there is some sort of ideal character for an athlete or ideal traits that you really look for as a coach that either you want in a person coming onto your team, or something that you really want to focus on intentionally on developing when they're in your team, in that team environment or one-on-one stuff?
Hmm. This is a challenging question and
Mm-hmm.
a great question. I have to acknowledge that I've got a bias,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. So for instance, with our current coaching team, we've got it's such a great environment to be a part of, because we have what I call these crucial confrontations. Our head coach and GM, Mike Tebow, is just great about that. He wants to know what everybody thinks. And as we're going around, say, talking about an athlete, I can feel myself being drawn to a certain athlete. And I've gotten better at being aware of what is my bias here.
Mm-hmm.
And then being receptive to somebody who's challenging that thinking.
Sure.
Because if there's one thing I've learned over the years, is that there's no quote unquote perfect team.
Mm-hmm.
You can be really particular about choosing certain personality types, people who embody certain qualities. But at the end of the day, that group still needs to get together and figure out a way to gel, to
Yeah.
be cohesive around the task. And you can have two good people, I'll put it in quotes, who
Yeah.
disagree.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's something about this capacity to engage and discuss and the dance of the give and take. It's not a character flaw to disagree, but the skill, whether you want to call it a character or value, is to be able to then have the conversation or crucial competition that's anchored around a shared goal. So I do think we see some similarities amongst high achievers,
Mm-hmm.
and whether, a resiliency, physically, mentally, constancy, emotionally, sometimes an indifference, or maybe said differently, this capacity to block out what doesn't matter in the
Yeah.
moment, and to be able, this ability to focus on what matters most. But some athletes just have this really acute ability to narrow in
Mm-hmm.
and stay with the thing that matters most. And others, they just laugh at themselves, and that allows them to bounce back.
Yeah.
So two different ways to get to the same ability to just redirect your attention. And so those are some of the things that I think I've noticed that are shared amongst high performers, high achievers, especially at the highest level. but there are a lot of different ways to get there, and sometimes that's a personal thing. Um, so I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah.
that's my
No,
general feeling around it.
yeah, because there is really no ideal. I think about this all the time, and when I reflect back on all the different teams I've been on, and all the different people who have been on those teams, um, they're always just a mixed bag. And when I talk about, it's usually when I'm talking about leadership styles actually, but it touches on what we're talking about now. I always juxtapose Nat Achanua and myself because we have completely different personalities. Like she's really gregarious, out there, intense. She'll say what needs to be said in the moment, and she has that intense personality, which is great. Works so well for her, and is a great addition to the team. And then myself, just as involved and intense on the court, but I have this like kind of like calm Zen, a little softer vibe going on,
Mm.
which is also a great addition to the team and is part of my leadership style and a great attribute. I don't know if you would call it character skill, whatever. Again, going back to that philosophical question, but I think despite those differences in traits, those commonalities between the two, like you mentioned, that openness of spirit, that willingness to be able to work through what will inevitably come, like those tough times, those disagreements, is the most important thing, and it's going to change. Like those exact skills are going to change between each relationship you have with different people on the team.
Yeah, I think you need some nasty. Like in my opinion, every great team has got some nasty and probably a little dirty,
Hmm. Yeah.
and I say that in the best way possible.
Hmm.
Why don't we mask it as savvy,
Okay. Yeah.
and sometimes you listen to maybe it's, let's call it the Hollywood effect, this
Mm.
romanticizing of what the locker room looks like on a championship team.
Hmm.
And it's just not that way. You need some grit. In basketball, you need five players who all want the rock and all think they can score. And then the challenge of building team cohesion, the challenge of the team and the coaching staff is to figure out how do we get these pieces to complement each other.
Exactly.
That's the
Exactly.
task. That's the task. But you got to have some. You got to have some nasty. You need somebody who's going to do the dirt worker, as Wayne Embry calls them. You need somebody like that, or multiples at times like that.
Mhm. Yeah. So you touched on something important, and that's one of the reasons why I do not have a desire to be a coach, is having to deal with all of that. I don't need that in my life, and I don't envy the coach's job doing working with all of that. But you are not only a coach, you are a coach of coaches. You share your knowledge regularly with these camps and clinics that you do. So I'm sure this is something that you probably touch on in your talks and working with people. How do you balance team dynamic? Let's put it like that.
Wow. I am in what for me is a very unique position. Like I referenced this coaching team, but in my opinion, one of the best to do it is Mike Tebow. So I've got a front
Mhm.
seat to somebody who's running a master class on navigating personalities and making them work. I
Mhm.
don't pretend that I've got it down. And every locker room is different.
True.
I was listening to a podcast recently with some soccer football coaches talking, and it was a similar type question, like how do get the group to come together, build cohesion,
Mhm.
and they were asking about your culture, and
Yeah.
the coach, she had said, she said, I don't know what my culture is going to be. I haven't even met my team yet,
Mhm.
which is
It's true.
with yeah, which is a different. position to
Mm-hmm.
take when, where you contrast that to the usual chatter, which is you got to decide what your culture is in advance. And then when you get your team together, you tell them what the team culture is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's something that gets imposed upon them. And this coach, she was saying like, no, my team, the personalities in that group, and her positioning was, I don't assume that who they were last season is who they're going to be this season, because
Absolutely.
people evolve and they develop, their motivations, their ambitions, their desires, the people who are talking to them change. And so she was saying, I'm open. I have a direction and intention, but they are going to be participants in this journey and defining that culture. And that for me resonates true. That's my feeling as well. Is, I've got a direction and intention. I may even have a word for it. Um, for instance, finding an edge, something we talk about with the mystics.
Okay.
If I say, hey, how do we find an edge? We want to find an edge in everything we do. Even something
Mm-hmm.
like that, which is a core part of a culture, you can turn that back to the athletes and say, okay, so what does that mean to you? How are we going to find an edge here? And then they start to build out the behaviors and the commitments, and the desirables that we're then going to anchor around. But I've offered up, or as a group, you've offered up the North Star. Hey, we want to find the edge. This is what we got to do, be competitive to be in the conversation around winning a championship. And so that's my approach, is to recognize that there's a person behind the player, and to do whatever I can to engage and connect and say, hey, we're walking together. We're doing this together. This is not just something being done to you, that it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
something that it's going to be done with you. Um, yeah. And so that's something I value and I try and recreate in any environment I'm in.
Yeah, that's very important, I feel like, especially when you're coaching adults, like grown women, and differing from just dictating top down that culture, like you mentioned, by actually having people build the culture, the whole team build and create this dynamic, moving form that will be your identity. And then I found that when that's the process, you actually get much greater buy-in, because how can you slough off and like ignore something that you've created and that you've committed to? Because as soon as you say the words and you say like, okay, I think this is a good idea, and this is how I see this phrase that you gave us, this is how we're going to integrate it, um, you automatically take responsibility for your actions. If someone's just dictating something to you, it's kind of like, well, maybe I agree, maybe I don't agree, and if I don't agree, then whatever, it's their thing. Like I
Hmm.
don't have to take responsibility because it's on them. That's what they decided. But as soon as we make it like a group effort, even if it's directed from the top, that buy-in can't be stopped, because it's really that connection and that responsibility I find.
Absolutely. You've created the dynamic of responsibility and accountability, like you're
Yes.
referencing, and then there's no opt out.
Mm-hmm.
A good friend of mine, Manawatsa, he calls it building a commitment-based culture,
I
not a
like that.
not a behavior-based culture. And so oftentimes when there's breakdowns, and breakdowns happen inevitably in every environment, even the most high-performing environments. And sometimes when we're dealing with challenges, we deal with the behavior,
Yeah.
right? You said you were going to be dot dot dot, versus the commitment. Hey, you said you're committed to this. Now I'm going to hold you to your commitment. How do we give me the background story, and you go through that process of having a breakdown conversation, but it's their commitment to the team that you're now holding them accountable to. And so
Yeah.
that creates a different,
It's a reminder as opposed to an accusation. That
yeah.
seems a lot more doable, because we often forget. I feel like, especially these days, like we be going crazy online. We just forget that people make mistakes and are not perfect human beings.
Hmm.
And then when something inevitably happens, we're like, why did you do this? Why are you not perfect? when really we should be almost expecting the mistake, but knowing that we can always come back and reset and, set up different accountability measures and be open to that process so that when it happens, we're not reacting. We're just, okay, let's reset and let's try again, which I
Yeah.
think is a huge part of sport, like failure, coming back, mistake, how do we refocus? Which is something I'm super into because I feel like we fail on a daily basis in sports. I think across the board as human beings, but in sports you kind of like you'll have your mistake on replay, slow mo, in front of thousands of
Yeah.
people, which is always a great feeling to have. But what kind of discussions do you have with your players or coaches around that failing process and reframing failure and mistakes?
We've got, we have so many different personalities, even amongst
Hmm.
our, I call it a coaching team.
Hmm.
Um, Coach T he's beautifully direct. And something that I aspire, maybe it's a Canadian in me. Sometimes
The
you know,
Canadian.
I can do the dance, try and be, and he's just beautifully direct, and it's appropriate for our context, our level. You're dealing, as you said, with grown women,
Hmm.
and in a professional setting at the highest level of the sport. So you can do that, and at the same time, that's not my style. I've got a directness in me, but um, I just do it differently. And I would say the same thing if we kind of went down the line with each member of our coaching team.
Hmm.
And, we've got a mental performance coach in Stu Singer, who you also know,
Yeah.
um, who's brilliant. He's a core part of who we are as a team. Everything that he does is interwoven into the fabric of our group. And so going back to, dealing with mistakes and the mistake response, that
Hmm.
in many ways is anchored by the work that Stu is doing group wide with the players and also with the coaching staff, and then individually with each player one on one. And then we get to work around it in terms of complementing the work that he's doing. And so that might mean pulling forward ideas. I think sometimes people treat the event, the game, as the moment where you're interjecting and dealing with a mistake. You're dealing with it in video, maybe in practice. Whereas I'm like, every moment's a chance for us to develop the
Hmm.
skill of having a positive response to a negative situation or an optimal response. Because sometimes your response is not always going to be positive.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what's an optimal way to refocus, anchor? And so I try and infuse my work individually with what is being done collectively, terminology, tactics, and skills. And so, yeah, everything, you talk about developing a great shooter. Like, this is the best shooters. They just think about the skill of shooting different. They just
Hmm.
do. They don't linger the same way. Well, that's a skill. That's a mistake response. And to your point, you're right. In sport, the highest paid athletes, they miss most of the shots they take. Like a great 3-point shooter in the game is 40%. You know, you think of baseball, a top hitter in baseball is, 250, 300. So you're having these moments of failure. If we can, sorry, I've used the rabbits a lot. I've used these more in this conversation. Sorry,
Right?
I just noticed it. I'm seeing myself go like this a lot. But I want to put it in quotations because there's so much. Words have power, and
Hmm.
thoughts are things. So whether you use the word failure or mistake or just a missed shot, it has to do with how you perceive what took place, and
Hmm.
that's important. So developing, um, Doug Lemov calls it this culture of error, where you're embracing the mistakes that come and adapting, and then as a coach, you're anticipating, all right, where might be the places they're going to struggle, and then you're coming up with ways then to help them navigate out of that by anticipating what's taking place. I just find, and this relates to where I'm at with our group, by just taking these things on head on, acknowledging the elephant in the room, it creates space for somebody to stretch and be like, okay, I'm in a safe place right now. I'm still being held accountable. My feet are still being held to the fire. And but we're not going to pretend like, and at the same time, I'm not going to get jumped on for every little thing. And so there's a bit of an alignment around how we handle mistakes, what things we let go, what things we don't let go, where there's consistency and maybe constancy, and emotional constancy, even as a group, for how you handle mistakes.
Yeah.
Which I think then anchors all the work you're doing individually with players around where they direct their attention and their energy.
Yeah, absolutely. This is such a fine balance between that freedom and accountability, that even, on a personal basis, whether you let a mistake go, or you feel like you need to be like, no, like, get the next one. There's always like, and I feel like it also depends on the day for me or what's been going on. I kind of have to regulate my response, because maybe one day I'm kind of slacking off a little bit and I do need to hold myself a little bit more accountable. Or another day where I'm like, maybe I'm just coming back from a road trip, physically, mentally exhausted. And it was an understandable mistake. Maybe that's not the moment where I need to be like, no, you need to do this and push through. Sometimes, like when it's game time, you do need to push through and let's do it. But recognizing how time ebbs and flows, and understanding different emotional states, I think is important, to even recognize what you're feeling. That's the number one state, because sometimes we don't even realize what's going on, and we snap, and or we descend down a rabbit hole in the middle of the game before we realize, oh, maybe I need to kind of refocus my attention here, which is why some of the work that Stu is doing with your team, and we have Bryce with our team, mental performance coaches, are so helpful in the world of sports, just because those seconds matter.
Yeah.
When we're lost, worried about what just happened, and totally not in the next moment, the next action, where we do need our full attention to perform optimally, or to respond optimally.
Yeah.
And you touched on something equally important, is that the coaches do that as well. You guys work with Stu as well. You guys work on your game as well, because you are part of the team. You're interacting back and forth between the team, and you carry a heavy burden, a load of that performance as well, which, as an athlete, I didn't pay a lot of attention to for very many years of my career. I'm just like, oh, they're there. They say things every once in a while, and they help me out, but I wasn't very curious about what went on the other side. But getting a little bit older, talking to more coaches, having more conversations, and then just like being more curious, you really realize the burden, and the work that goes on behind the scenes. Here in France, we have Shona Thorburn, who is our former PG for the Canadian national team. So she's my assistant coach here. So went from teammate to coach, which is a fun process. Always great to be with her. She still plays with us sometimes.
Oh, yeah?
When we don't have enough people, and like maybe there's an injury or something's going on, and she has to lace up, and she dishes a few assists here and there, and I'm always like, oh man, so good. So good. She hasn't lost the touch yet. So it's so nice. But I'm wondering, as you made that process, that transition rather, from player to coach, For those people who are watching who may be coaches, I saw a few sign on who are. How is that process for you? What was maybe one or two of the biggest or most blatant or most memorable lessons that you learned in that transition of just switching from a player's mind to a coaching mind?
I'm probably going to answer this different than most.
Oh
I've
yes.
always, I don't know. I mean, I've always felt that my strength was seeing the game through the player's eyes. So
Cool.
it's still my orientation. Like I'm seeing how they're experiencing from their vantage point still, and just that ability to empathize is, I think, what I bring. And there was a while where I tried to, subdue that, maybe hide it, but now, I just embrace it. This is the value that I add. Hey, maybe she's thinking, or, you know, um, and so I think it helps. I like to think that I'm thinking from the perspective of a player, and I'm relating to what's being done from the perspective of the person, the player, the learner.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think there's something to that that all coaches can benefit from. Um, so I'm going to jump around a little bit, maybe tie back into something that we discussed earlier and something you'd shared. Like I believe Pat Riley used to called it in his book the curse of knowledge. When I read it, it just kind of stabbed me in the heart. I'm like, oh my gosh, and it's this. You can take it in a lot of different directions, but to me, one of the things that happens, I think, as we transition in life from our youth to adulthood
Mhm.
is we see things where we are and we've forgotten about the process of learning.
Totally.
And so as coaches, we're like, well, he should or she should be seeing bop, 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 bop,
Yeah.
right? And we're comparing our finished product to their work in progress.
Yeah.
And we expect them to see the game in HD like we do as coaches because we've been studying film and hours on end. And yeah, the best players study film, but they never study as much film as a coach does. They're
Mhm.
still looking at the game in analog. They don't have this, this rich, and plus they're performing. They're in the heat of it, so their vantage point is different. Whereas as coaches, we're zoomed out and we're back, and we can see a bigger, more broad picture.
Mhm.
And we have to remember this. We have to remember the limited capacity that each player has. It varies based on age, experience, and a number of factors, but we just have to remember that they're not seeing what we're seeing. And what they're seeing, they have a different point of view, literally and figuratively. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
even right on court in action is a different point of view. And so they're seeing things, and each player has different capacity to hold on to information and to see more of the picture. I think it's really important. The other one, to your question, as a coach, everybody's performing. It's not just the athletes
Mhm.
that are going through a high intensity um, experience. As coaches, we are too. We carry our own weight of expectation, and we are responding, right, wrong, or otherwise. We're responding to the gravity of the moment.
Yeah.
And the same thing we're asking of the athletes, we have to ask and work at ourselves, which is keeping your feet on the floor, staying in the moment, not carrying things forward, not anticipating too far ahead, understanding how what I do triggers. So that's the thing sometimes as coaches we forget is that
Yeah.
we can trigger an athlete to go to a place that they might not have gone themselves. They might have been dealing with the mistake, and all of a sudden you're like, Miranda, da, 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 and then all of a sudden now you're on that downward spiral. Meanwhile, you might have been working through it and
Yeah.
you were adapting. And all of a sudden,
Hmm.
because we're feeling the gravity of a mistake, we pass that energy on to the player and boom, now they're
Yeah.
off. And then it
Yeah.
becomes this chicken and the egg because look, she's not capable of keeping her to it. And someone's like, well, I triggered that, not her.
Yeah.
I was the one. And so that's something I think as coaches we need to work at with
Mhm.
intention. We need to get the reps to be aware of how our emotional state, how our words, good or bad, can help or hurt an athlete's
Mhm.
performance, as well as our performance. Like, where are we placing our attention?
Yeah.
Am I with that ref? Bah, 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 because I want to let that ref know that, meanwhile the action's going on over here, or am I capable of shifting and placing my attention on the team, the next thing?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That's the thing that's so fascinating about basketball and sports in general for me is that there's so many different things going on at the same time. You're
Hmm.
already in a group, which ups the complexity of a situation 100-fold. You're making split-second decisions. The endorphins are pumping, so we got energy levels up, stimulation levels up, um, maybe anger,
No
passion,
doubt.
like all of this, you're trying to regulate literally your physiological responses while trying to make split second, really precise decisions while um, making sure that your relationships between your teammates and your coaches are going on at the same time. It's like a microcosm of life, but like heightened 10 times, 100 times over. And that's the fascinating thing about sports for me. Like I've always said, I've never been a ball is life type of person. I'm not like, oh, sports is all I want to do all my life, which is it's cool if that's you. Like it's just never been my thing. I love basketball and I love it more each year just because I see more of the intricacies within the sport. And that's what fascinates me. Everything else that's going on below the surface. And then, like we kind of talked about when we talked briefly before this IG Live, taking those moments and then uh, extrapolating them and comparing them to life. And then having all these random philosophical thoughts about, like, oh, this is a perfect analogy for this part of life, and then we just get
Yeah.
lost in those moments. I love those moments. Um, but I would love to touch on a little bit on what you're doing right now. You're currently in Toronto, right?
No.
Or
Home for me is the Cayman Islands, Grand Cayman Islands. That's home base for me. We
okay.
moved back here in 2015, and
Ooh.
so I've been here, and like everyone, just navigating through the pandemic, and for me, the challenges, the blessings, and I'll use it loosely, the curse of working remotely. And so yeah, Cayman is home base for me.
Nice, nice. Yeah. Now that you mentioned that, I did see the time zone that was marked between some of your. Obviously, I was like, okay, maybe cool. Is that where your family is originally from?
No, we are all we're Toronto based. So we left Toronto and first moved to Cayman, and we were here for probably about 6 years, and then left here to go to Hong Kong. We were based out of Hong Kong for a couple years, and
Okay.
then ended up back in Grand Cayman. But we're all Canadian, my son included. But it's funny, he spent all of, I don't know, only a couple weeks cumulatively over time in Canada. So he has these moments, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm Canadian." I'm like, "Yeah, but you say Toronto. So are you really?"
Toe with a T. I was
Yeah.
trying to teach that to my French teammates, because they're like, how do you say Toronto? Toronto.
Yeah.
Gotta say it real aggressively. So you're working from home right now, um, with all the blessings and curses that go along with it. Do you have any projects coming up? I know you like to talk a little bit about what you mentioned before, this group project that you're putting together. I don't know how to describe it, so I'll let you
Oh,
use your.
you're all good. I I like to describe it as like a 6-lane highway. I've got a number of different things, but we're all going the same highway. So my main thing is the Mystics. And
Yeah.
then to complement that, especially this time of year in our off season, I've launched a passion project called ACX Basketball, stands for Athlete Centered Experience. And it's a youth focused initiative, U15 and down. One of the lessons that I learned as I was traveling and interacting with a lot of European coaches is this: they flipped the pyramid, they flipped the paradigm on its head, and they said, "Hey, we got to put the best coaches at the youngest level," whereas the
Mm,
very Western North American model is to keep the best coaches at the top. But
yeah.
then, the question that came up for me from that is, well, what is the best under 8 coach look like? What does the best under 12 coach look like? What are the characteristics, the qualities, the skills,
Mm,
um, the posture that of a coach that's working at each of those different levels look like? And so ACX basketball is just that. It's locally in Grand Cayman. The bent, the bias is to create access and opportunity for kids to play. Beautiful island, but there's still some challenges giving kids the opportunity, girls
mm,
especially, but also many boys, an
mm,
opportunity to play. And
mm,
then bigger than that is to now build a framework for coach development that says to somebody who just is coaching that U18, here's what it looks like. Here's the skills you need to have. Here's some ideas for creating your learning environment, for engaging, to really anchoring around, as I heard Todd Bean, a soccer football coach, calls it, joy in learning,
mm.
everything we're doing. And so that's what I've been working on, both of those two things, a local initiative that's got global ambitions.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. That's really, really interesting just because all those different developmental processes that are going on with each different age group, and then you have to adapt those characteristics of the coaches to each of those. That's quite a
Hmm.
project, and it sounds really incredible. And I wish you all the luck with it. I follow ACX on Twitter, and I'm loving the things that you're posting over there. Where can we follow you online? Not offline, that would be creepy.
It would be. Um, the benefits of having a unique name, as you know, is that you can own your digital real estate. So you can find me on Facebook, Twitter is where I'm most active, and Instagram at Sefu Bernard, SEFUBERNARD. I don't, what is it, TikTok. I don't Snap, not yet.
I don't either.
I need your energy on my Instagram game. I'm kind of struggling with it, but I try and share as much as possible on those places. For those who are youth sport driven, ACX
Mhm.
basketball. And for those who are on the high performance side, they can find me at the Llabb, THELLABB is where I share some more ideas for people who are working with more high performers or looking to go deeper. My framework for that is depth over breadth. And so those are the 3 places.
Yeah, I would really encourage anybody who is watching or who will watch this later to give him a follow because he always posts gems. It's always insightful and thoughtful and humble. And
Thank
we
you.
all need more of that on our timelines, I think. So thank you, Sefu, for being with me today. We're gonna have to do this again sometime because I had so much fun. And just enjoy the rest of your day over there.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Appreciate it.